This is Jacob's Algebra, Chapter 13, Lesson 4, Part 2, Solving Quadratic Equations by Factoring. So we'd written out the problem for number 4g, x plus a times x plus b equals 0, but hadn't actually gotten to the point of solving it. We can use the zero product rule to say that x plus a equals 0 or x plus b equals 0 will be a solution. In fact, both of them are solutions. And so we can solve the left equation by subtracting a from both sides to get x equals negative a. And we can solve the right equation by subtracting b from both sides to get x equals negative b. So our solutions for this are x equals negative a and x equals negative b. Both of these are solutions to the equation. Okay, let's look now at part H. Come on, new page. Okay, number 4, part H. The equation that we have is ax minus 1 times bx minus c. And then it doesn't say equals 0, but it does tell you in the top that each of the products make 0. So you can go ahead and write equals 0. By the zero product rule, we know if we multiply things to make 0, then any of the factors can be 0. So we're going to write whoops, I switched out of pen mode again. Okay, ax minus 1 equals 0. And bx minus c equals 0. So to solve the left equation, we would add 1 to both sides to get ax equals 1. And then we would divide both sides by a to get x equals 1 over a. To solve the right side equation, we would add c to both sides to get bx equals c. And then we would divide both sides by b to get x equals c over b. So our solutions to this equation are x equals 1 over a and x equals c over b. So that is how number 4 works. It's just like number 7. Remember, it shows you the products, and it doesn't show you that it equals 0, but it does. So just write equals 0 at the end, and then use the zero product rule. For number 7 that I assigned for homework, these are already factored. All you have to do is set each factor equal to 0. Okay, so now we're going to move on to look at number 5. Number 5 is just like number 8 that I assigned for homework. It says solve each of the following quadratic equations by the factoring method. So what you have to do this time, you are given a quadratic equation and you have to factor it and then set the factors equal to 0. So it gives you one more step to do than you had in the previous problem. So let's look first at part A. We have x squared minus 9 equals 0, and we need to factor this. Okay, notice this is a difference of 2 squares because this is x squared minus 3 squared. And anytime you have a difference of 2 squares, you take those same 2 terms and add them and also subtract them. So x and 3 are the 2 things we have that are squared. So we multiply the sum by the difference, and that will give us x squared minus 9. So x plus 3 times x minus 3 equals 0. We set each factor equal to 0. X plus 3 equals 0, and x minus 3 equals 0. We solve this left equation by subtracting 3 from both sides to get x equals negative 3. We solve the right-hand equation by adding 3 to both sides, so x equals 3. So our solution is x equals negative 3 and 3. Both of those will make our equation equal to 0. Okay, let's look now at part B. This is number 5, part B. Our equation is x squared minus 9x equals 0. Okay, thing I need you to notice here is that we have a common factor. Both of these terms have x, so we can factor out the x. So this is going to be x times x minus 9 equals 0, because x times x is x squared, and x times negative 9 is negative 9x. So we need to set both of these factors equal to 0. Be sure if x is a factor that you have x equals 0 listed. Do not leave that one out. I see that happen all the time. People will do this for all of the factors that are in parentheses, but forget that when you have an x out front, that also has to equal 0. So we have x equals 0, and we have x minus 9 equals 0. So for this right-hand equation, we need to add 9 to both sides, and we get x equals 9. So our solution for number 5b is x equals 0 and x equals 9. Both of those will give us 0 in our original equation. Let's look now at part C. Part C, we have 2x squared plus 2x equals 0. We have common factors here. 2x is our greatest common factor. 2x times what is 2x squared? That's going to be x. 2x times what is 2x? That's going to be a positive 1. So 2x times x plus 1 equals 0. So we need to set each of these factors equal to 0. That means 2x equals 0 and x plus 1 equals 0. Divide both sides in this left-hand equation by 2 and we get x equals 0. Subtract 1 from both sides in this right-hand equation and we get x equals negative 1. So our solutions are x equals negative 1 and 0. Both of those values will give us 0 in our original equation. Now let's jump down to number 5, part E. We have x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals 0. Okay, so we need to factor this somehow. And we know we're going to start with x and x here. We need to find two numbers that multiply to make 25 and add to make 10. Well, the only factors of 25 are 1 and 25 or 5 and 5. So it has to be the 5 and 5 because those will add together to make 10. And because this is a positive here, we know that either both factors are positive or both factors are negative. Since we have a negative here for our middle term, it means that both of them have to be negative. So we have x minus 5 times x minus 5 equals 0. So we can know that x minus 5 equals 0. Now we could write this out twice, but once x minus 5 equals 0, it does. You don't have to write it out 2 times. I mean, really, do you have to solve x minus 5 equals 0 2 times? You can just solve it once. That's fine. So we need to add 5 to both sides, and we get x equals 5. That is our only solution for this one because we only had one thing that was just repeated. Okay, let's look now at part I. Number 5, part I, we have x squared plus 12x minus 64 equals 0, and we need to factor this. Okay, so let's write this out. We know it's going to be x and x. We need to think, what are the factors of 64 that will subtract to make 12? Well, the factors of 64, we've got 1 times 64, 2 times 32, 4 times 16, and 8 times 8. Since this is a minus here, it means we need to find the difference, and the difference needs to be 12. Well, the difference between 64 and 1 is 63. The difference between 32 and 2 is 30. The difference between 16 and 4 is 12, so that's what we need. So 4 and 16 are the ones that we need. I'll go ahead and write them over here. And then the bigger one has to be positive because we have positive here. So the 16 is positive and the 4 is negative, and that will equal 0. Now we set each factor equal to 0. So x minus 4 equals 0, and x plus 16 equals 0. To solve the left-hand equation, we add 4 to both sides, so x equals 4. To solve the right-hand equation, we subtract 16 from both sides, so we have x equals negative 16. So our solutions are x equals negative 16 and x equals 4. Let's look now at part J, number 5J. We have 9x squared minus 1 equals 0. This is actually a difference of two squares. 9x squared is 3x squared minus 1 squared equals 0. So we can factor this as 3x plus 1 times 3x minus 1 and set that equal to 0. So now we can set each of these factors equal to 0. We have 3x plus 1 equals 0 and 3x minus 1 equals 0. For the left-hand equation, we subtract 1 from both sides to get 3x equals negative 1. And now we divide both sides by 3 to get x equals negative 1/3. For the right-hand equation, we add 1 to both sides to get 3x equals 1. And now we divide both sides by 3 to get x equals 1/3. So we have x equals negative 1/3 or positive 1/3. Both of those will give us 0 for our final answer. Let's look at just a couple more from number 5. Number 5, part K. We have 9x squared minus 8x equals 0. So here we do have a common term of x, so we can pull x out and have 9x minus 8 equals 0, multiplied by x. This is two factors, so we need to set each factor equal to 0. X equals 0, and 9x minus 8 equals 0. So we need to add 8 to both sides to get 9x equals 8. Divide both sides by 9 to get x equals 8/9. Our solutions for this are x equals 0 and x equals 8/9. Okay, so our last one we're going to do from number 5 is part L. So number 5, part L. And that one says 9x squared minus 8x minus 1 equals 0. So we need to factor this out. Anytime you have a number in front of your x squared, I recommend using the grid. So I'm going to draw a grid and put in my grid lines. And we know that in the top left box we have our 9x squared, and in the bottom right box we have our -1. Now we need to multiply the 9 by the 1 to get 9, and now we list all the factors of 9. We've got 1 and 9, and we've got 3 and 3. We need to find, because this is a minus in front of the 1, we need to find the pair of factors that has a difference of 8. So that's going to be the 9 and the 1. So I'm going to write a 9x and an x. And we know that the bigger one has to be negative because we have a -8x. So I'm going to make this -9x and a +x. Now for each row and for each column, I find the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor in this first row is 9x. The greatest common factor in this second row is just 1. Greatest common factor in the first column is x. Greatest common factor in the second column is a -1. So this is going to factor as 9x plus 1 times x minus 1, and that's going to equal 0. Now I need to set each factor equal to 0. So 9x plus 1 equals 0, and x minus 1 equals 0. So for this left-hand equation, subtract 1 from both sides to get 9x equals -1. Divide each side by 9 to get x equals -1/9. Right-hand equation, I add 1 to both sides to get x equals 1. So my solutions are x equals -1/9 and x equals 1. Both of those will make our original equation equal to 0. So that was number 5. It's just like number 8 that I assigned as homework. Now we're going to look at number 6. Number 6 is just like number 9. These take things just one step further than the ones before. So the first problem you have in set 3, it's already factored. You just set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. In the second problem in set 3, it's already in standard form. You have to factor it first, and then you set each factor equal to 0. For the third problem in set 3, you have to first put the equation in standard form, then you factor it, then you set each factor to equal to 0 and solve for x. So each problem is one step more than the problem before it. So we're just going to do parts D, E, and F from number 6. So number 6, part D, what we're given is x plus 2 times x plus 6 equals 5. Now we can't do anything with it in this form. What we have to do first is multiply this out. X times x is x squared. X times 6 is 6x. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times 6 is 12, and that equals 5. Now I'm going to combine like terms. I have an x squared. 6x and 2x is 8x. Whoops, that's a squared. 6x and 2x is 8x. And then I have a 12 here. I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides to get a +7. And that equals 0. Now I can factor this. So how does x squared plus 8x plus 7 factor? Well, we know we're going to have an x on both sides. How do we make 7? Well, the only factors of 7 are 1 and 7. This is plus, so that means we either have to have both positive or both negative. Since our middle term is positive, that means they're both positive. So x plus 7 times x plus 1 equals 0. Now I set each factor equal to 0. Went out of pen mode. And then we subtract 7 from each side on the left equation, and we subtract 1 from each side on the right-hand equation, and so we get x equals -7 and x equals -1. Those are both solutions for number 6D. So I will do a part 3 video that covers parts E and F, but the big thing on this third problem is that first you have to multiply everything out, then you put it in standard form, then you factor it, then you use